little buzzing earlier, but I think we're good to go. So I am kind of winging this. This sort of winging everything. But so we have Jason Anspach, who am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah. Yep, that's correct. Nice
Anspach.
in German, not how it's spelled. Yeah.
Okay, so it's spelled like Anspach or Anspach, but it's Anspach.
Yeah, it's
Um,
on spot.
okay,
Yep.
so and he we were talking about what to do this year. We did sort of I think we did the kind of a panel with both of you guys, you and Nick, um, uh, at both of the last two. My memory is terrible, but I think we did that twice now, and we were thinking about what to do this time. And Jason suggested just sort of like an informal like a discussion with him, and I thought, well, we'll make it a panel basically, but just a question and answer with you with
Hmm.
about writing and publishing and everything else that's going on with you. So I guess I wanted to. I'm somewhat familiar with you guys and stuff. I've read a few of the Galaxy's Edge books. I'm sure there are people in our audience who are a lot more familiar with that universe and the other stuff projects that you're working on. But so why don't you just tell us, God, why don't you just give us an overview of what it is that you and Nick Cole do and how you got into this and what it's turning into? Because it seems like every time I turn around, you guys have a new venture or imprint or something going on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, from a writing perspective, I write military science fiction, military fantasy. So, I'd say my three biggest series are Galaxy's Edge, Forgotten Ruin, and Wayward Galaxy. And I think Nick and we started writing together around 2016, just about the time that he had been canceled before that was a thing, before people knew to use that word. But what he had his publishing contract revoked because his editor didn't like some of the stuff that he was putting in Control Alt Revolt, which seems incredibly tame if you know that story. But so he kind of felt like he had nowhere to go. I was just coming up, and we were talking about projects. I told him what I'd like my next project to be, and he said I should just write it and encourage me along the way. And I said, well, would you write it with me? Because I felt like I had a lot to learn from him. And he said, yeah, no one else wants me, so sure. And then that ended up being a pretty big bestseller and never really slowed down. So um, we we have a term that we call um, working the rifle, which is like we're in the pit, and there's a lot of things that you can do when you're publishing, when you're running your business, but the thing that does the most for us is writing. And so we try to focus on a certain amount of that, but I have a pretty severe case of um, self-diagnosed ADD. I can't just do one thing for a long period of time without going absolutely crazy. So that's where a lot of things like the business partnerships and the merchandising, the charity fundraising, all those sorts of things come into play for me. I need to have more things to do. I wish I could just sit down and write and write and write. It would be a lot more lucrative, but I go crazy. So that's basically it. We've been writing. We started an imprint called Wargate Books, which focuses on military science fiction and military fantasy. Just trying to serve a market that it seems a lot of other corporations don't want to serve, and we're finding pretty good success by doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that you guys have found a niche or several niches. And there's, by the way, we have a beautiful ad these guys bought in the back of the program. So this is all their stuff, Galaxy's Edge. It's the Nick he's talking about is Nick Cole, who's another
Mhm.
indie author. And a lot of you are probably familiar with the story of what happened with Nick. Jason, you want to just give you mentioned a little bit, and since we were talking, we had a panel about cancellation earlier, and that's sort of the theme of this year's BasedCon. So you want to give a brief summary of that experience of Nick's?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's got a post up on his Substack, so you can go there and fact check anything I say. But essentially, he was writing a sequel, well, a prequel to his book Soda Pop Soldier, and this one had the AI Skynet style machine learning system that rises up and attempts to destroy humanity. And so for the prologue of the book, he he gave the reason for AI going ahead and deciding that it needed to preemptively wipe out humankind in order to preserve itself. And the story went that once the AI became self-aware, it began to sort of gorge itself on human television, trying to understand who its creators were, what their values were, that sort of thing. And the most popular television show was a reality show with, typically narcissistic, scummy people, and all of the globe is waiting on bated breath for the big season finale of the show, where the gal, she's set to get married. She goes ahead and in her bachelor party has a really wild time, gets pregnant, and decides to have an abortion. So her fiance won't know, I guess, until he watches the show. And the AI concludes that if humanity as a race is willing to destroy its own offspring, then he should not believe that it would be unwilling to destroy him. So the AI goes ahead and launches the nukes, and off we go into the book. That prologue was it. Well, his editor in New York, just a young woman kind of out of college, said this is offensive, and you need to change the reason for the AI to rebel, or we're not going to publish this book. And Nick said multiple times if they would have just asked nicely, he might have done it. But since they said do it or else, that immediately got a, oh, really? And so he said, not going to change it. And sure enough, HarperCollins canceled his contract, gave him back the rights to his books, and that was it. It was all over. So that's really the impetus that led to us starting our own publishing company. But that's what happened to him. Just insulted one editor, and that was enough for him to no longer be a published author. And then there's a whole laundry list of pretty big names in publishing who reached out to him behind the scenes. I'm sorry, this shouldn't happen. I can't believe this. Wow. But as is often the case, that's all that, it only exists in private messages. There's not a willingness. I think that's changing now, but at the time especially, there just was not a willingness to stand up and say, hey, this big corporation with all the money is wrong. And so on it went.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me that the mention of abortion in the story is it's not at all it's not like this book is about abortion at all. I mean, that was just like he needed a reason that made sense to this computer to turn against humanity, and that was a perfectly rational thing. And it wasn't. There's nothing in the book that's pro or anti-abortion at all. It's not really political in that sense. But he touched on an issue in a way that was just not acceptable to the intelligentsia or whoever, and they felt empowered to basically revoke a contract over this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. That's basically it. It was kind of a writing so that an abortion would even be viewed by the villain of the story as bad.
Right.
Is offensive, and we cannot allow it. Like, we cannot allow anything that's going to make this seem anything but good.
So, and what year was that?
That would have been around 2015, 2016.
Okay, so not even that long ago, but it does feel like the landscape has changed a bit since then.
Yeah, right.
We had Blaine Pardoe, as you know, here earlier, talking about his ordeals, and I'm wondering if you have any, well, not comment on that, but how did you get in touch with Blaine, and what's he doing for you these days?
Yeah, so Blaine is published. His Land and Sea that he does with Brent Evans of Creative Juggernaut is published by our imprint Wargate Books, and so yeah, when he got, I mean, his was, I'd say, even more nefariously. You can expect sort of a New York intelligentsia, straight out of the Ivy League, editor, 3-hour lunch break editor, take offense with a guy like Nick Cole. That's not surprising. But with Blaine, as best I understand it, there was a real coordinated effort with a lot of moving parts and a lot of dishonesty, just outright lies to get him out of where he was writing with BattleTech. And, it worked, it caved. Um, and, and so all we really did was say, hey, sorry, this shouldn't happen. We're sorry that it did. And if you ever want to publish one of your books, we're happy to do it. And I think because Nick had gone through something similar, they were able to kind of have a conversation and compare notes and and the community that reads our books, the Galaxy's Edge Wargate community is a very supportive, very tight knit group, and so I think that they kind of were encouraging him as well. They're really our biggest marketers, and he said, "Yeah, let's go ahead and publish here." He had a lot of offers on the table, and we didn't actually think anything of it until our guy came back and said, "Oh, Blaine wants to publish with us," and we were like, "Oh, really? No shit. Okay, well, let's go."
That's very cool. So I do want to get more into what you guys are actually working on, but before we do that, what do you think has changed as far as like between Nick's situation in, I think you said 2016 or 2015,
Mhm.
and then Blaine's situation more recently? What do you think has changed as far as like the cancellation landscape, if you will?
I think the biggest thing that's changed was I think when this was happening early on, there was a definite fear of you could be next. And um, like I said, there's a list of people that have reached out to Nick, primarily, but me as well, behind the scenes. I was never canceled because I never even had dreams of playing in the professional publishing landscape. Rob, I know you kind of worked with Amazon's publishing wing, if I remember, and,
Yes.
and you've
Yep.
done some traditional publishing stuff, but I just had no interest. Like to me, it was always, why work for the corporation when you can work for yourself? And so, um, but there's a lot of people that were, I would say, back then there were a lot of people that were willing to toe the line, stay quiet, you know, make the mandated, oh, I kind of disagree with how this was handled by this person, and then behind the scenes saying, hey, nothing personal. I just have to, they were putting pressure on me, that kind of a thing. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of fear. And there were relatively few guys like Nick or like Larry Correa who were willing to just stand up and say, I don't care. I'm just going to do this. And I think now there's a bit more of a playbook where the same attempt is still there to say, you're horrible and no one likes you. And, none of the respectful organizations are going to support you. But those respectful organizations, I think, have lost so much goodwill and have lost so much of the shine that they might have once had that nobody cares. And so I think when you hit with it now, barring those guys that are working for a corporate job, and it is a catastrophe. But certainly in our corner of the world, where the publisher is saying, hey, do what we say or we won't give you 10% of awful marketing royalties.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
just
We're
not
not
that
offering
big of
that
a
much.
threat anymore, right? Yeah, it's like, well, sorry. I think a lot of publishers still don't understand just how much uh, income people can make in the independent world if they're successful.
Yeah, you alluded to my publishing history a little bit. What I did is actually I started self-published, and well, I looked a little bit into getting published and queried a few publishers when I had finished my first novel, Mercury Falls, and I ended up I had some interest, but no real bites. And after about three or four queries, I was like, this sucks. I'm hearing that you can just do this yourself and bypass this whole business. And so I was
Right.
like, why not do that? And my timing was just about perfect because Kindle was just starting to become a thing then. And all the publishers were overpricing their books on Kindle because they wanted to get the same price that they got for paperbacks or hardcovers.
Right.
So I snuck in with 99 cent ebook, and there's other people who did this, and it was
Hmm.
pretty easy to get really highly ranked on Amazon Anyway, long story short, since this isn't about me, I went from self-publishing. I got picked up by Amazon publishing in print, and then kind of ran with them for a few years when they were throwing a lot of money at us. And then there was kind of a crash in the ebook market, and Amazon publishing kind of pulled back with the funding. And then since then, I've been basically, with one exception, self-published.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I think for the most part, for most people, self-publishing is the way to go, or going with a small indie publisher like you guys, who know what they're doing, for one thing, know
Mhm.
what market they're selling to, and don't have all the bloat of New York publisher. How big is your operation now?
I think we've got like maybe 8 people, either working for us as employees or, pretty steady independent contractors, that just prefer to not be employees for their own, tax purposes. There's definitely some value with being able to write off a lot of things if you're running your own business. So it's about that size, at this point, and that would include Nick and I. So it's not massive, but it's been able to pull in some fantastic authors like Blaine, and we've been able to have success in what we've done. We've been able to partner with some fairly large corporations that I wouldn't necessarily say are like-minded, but definitely are open to entertaining all customer bases versus just the preferred customer bases. And so that's allowed us to really shore up and expand the reach for what's otherwise a pretty small company. But our goal is not to be a huge publisher. Really, our thought process was, we know what our audience likes. We know that because they email us all the time about it. If we released a book a week, that wouldn't be enough for some people. So there's definitely a demand for more material like what we write. So can we find other people who can write similar high quality stories, and then we'll package them and do what we do, and then market it to our audience and beyond. And so that's worked out, well in a lot of cases. In other cases, people haven't dug exactly what we've put out. But I think, anytime you start publishing a lot of titles, that's what's going to happen, right? Like, you're not going to get a hit with everything, but it's been enough that we've been able to move forward and grow, and more importantly, expand that audience base, and just keep finding the people who this is what they want to spend their time doing. This is how they want to spend their Saturday nights, or their Sundays, just reading a story. And it's funny, oftentimes when people find a story that they like, their first response when they're done is not to say, now let me find something totally different, but it's to say, well, what else is like this? Did they write more books? Is there another story like this? I'm sad that I left this world. And so that's essentially what we did. We followed up our action movie with another action movie, and we haven't done the melodramatic turn, right? Like that all the serious comedians try to do at some point. That, everyone likes my comedies, but no one likes my drama. And then, the drama comes out and nobody wants to watch it.
See, that's how I do it. Like I come out with a book that's really, or a series that's really popular, and then I shift to something completely different that loses everybody.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's why you guys are more successful than I am.
Yeah.
So
No, I've noticed it. I've noticed it from afar. I've seen, oh, people really, really love this space Viking thing that Rob is doing.
right.
You're like, here's 10,000 words. This is my AIM radio. This is my Atlas Shrugged. And that looks awesome too. I've got it in my audiobook library. But like you said, it's so different that there's going to be some people that say, hell yeah.
Right.
And then there's going to be other people that say, well, who else is writing space Vikings? And
Right,
that's
right.
just the
It's
nature of
just
the
you
commercial.
lose people, and it's difficult. Like I have some hardcore fans, a lot of whom are in this room,
Hmm.
who will follow me and read, just about everything, or at least buy the books.
Hmm.
But yeah, every time you lose, you shift, and these genres these market niches are they're ultra fine, and like you said, like it can be space Vikings, and if you go
Hmm.
to space Indians or something else, you're going to lose 80% of the people because that's not what they want, and it can be really
Right.
really close thematically. It can look the same, but it's not space Vikings, so they don't want it.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And sometimes it's just, striking something that people want and they didn't even know they wanted it. But you look at, my friend Jeff Cheney and his writing partner Terry Maggart, they wrote a series called Backyard Starship, which was just a simple, a guy finds a starship in an old barn, like an old barn find, and that leads him to sort of an intergalactic adventure. Well, that book sold just absolutely insane numbers, just massive amounts of sales, and then other people started writing, Grandpa's Starship and other similar stories, where the premise is very similar. It's limes and lemons at that point. But guess what happened? Like, people are like, well, these guys aren't writing enough backyard starship stories, so I'll read this guy's. And so once people find a vibe that they like, they just keep listening to it. And so in that way, books nowadays are a lot like how music is, or at least used to be, where everybody really loved Rat and everybody really loved, 80s glam rock. And then all of a sudden, everybody loved grunge. And it just sort of felt like it just happened overnight. And bands that could not have gotten on the radio a couple years before got massive airtime. And that's just books work a lot like that.
And so how do you consciously look for those trends and try to get ahead of them, or follow them? And the
Um,
obvious follow up to that is that limiting to you as an author,
I wouldn't say
publisher?
that we look. Yeah, I don't look for those trends. I do know people that do absolutely look for those trends, and they will, that they're specifically doing market research, and they know things that I don't know. Like they'll say, "Hey, nobody wants alien invasion right now." I was like, "Oh, well, all right, like that's good to know, I guess." But yeah, people are done with alien invasion. It's going to be a while before that sells well again, or whatever it might be. Um, so I do know some people that are that keyed in on it. I think we tend to not do that because I think you turn into a spot where you're essentially just chasing the zeitgeist, and you've got to be really fast. And I don't know that you can write a compelling, quality enough title quickly enough, especially if it's the only all you're doing. If all you're doing is chasing cash, maybe I'm being naive here. Maybe I'm just not professional enough, but I feel like if you're chasing cash, it'll probably show up in the prose, and that's okay. People write popcorn books. People make popcorn movies. That's all right. Sometimes you just want to just mindlessly entertain yourself. So no slight to that, but for how we do it, I don't think we could do it. Now, we tend to brainstorm multiple titles, and we're constantly writing. And when we do get bored, kind of like you talked about, Rob, when we say, well, now I want to try this, we'll do it, but we'll do it in small doses and slowly build it up. And then if we feel like I think the time is right for this to come out and we have a book or two books done, then we'll publish it. So our title Forgotten Ruin was that way, which was just a military fantasy. We had been working on that for years and stockpiling it and kind of had it ready to go. And we just got a sense as we looked at what was selling, as we looked at how the culture was doing, what people were talking about, what their feelings were about different things. We said, yeah, I think this is a good time. I think that the audience is ready for this, and that sold really well as a result. So that's as close as we get to it. It's what we wanted to write to begin with, but if we're still building a stretch of books that we're going to release, then we're willing to be patient versus I'm done, let me get it out right now.
So how many titles did you guys publish this past year, or in 2023 so
Yeah.
far?
This is the kind of stats that a responsible person would have right off.
Give me like within a few, I don't know, no order of magnitude.
Yeah, I think if we look at everybody, we've probably done, you know, maybe 20 titles
Okay.
um, this year. Maybe another 10 to 15 foreign translations. We've been doing some of that, releasing some Galaxy's Edge and Forgotten Ruin titles in the German language. So about that, uh, part of our issue is, I don't know if you want to call it an issue actually, but part of what we run into is um, we have agreements with different audiobook studios, and so when we're working with Audible Studios or Podium Publishing, you know, they'll the book will be done and we've turned it in and kind of forgotten about it, gotten our advance, and then it's just a matter of waiting. When can the particular narrator, and when it's a big narrator like an R.C. Bray or a Ray Porter or something like that, these guys are booked out for sometimes 2 years in advance. So you have a title that's finished, but it can't actually release until the audiobook's been recorded and it can all come at once. So that's why I tend to just send it in and then forget about it until until the audiobook publishers call back and say, what do you think about this date? And then it's back into reality again.
So when are we getting a Galaxy's Edge TV show and video game and lunchboxes and
I think lunchboxes would be pretty easy. Like we could probably pull
yeah,
that
you
one
could
off
do
pretty
that.
quick. For the TV show, so we made the mistake. We made the mistake early on, if we were just wanting to be pure capitalists, to say to our audience, we're not going to allow Galaxy's Edge to be one of those shows that gets taken and then spun into a different direction that's wildly different from what we've done. We're not going to do that. And the reason why we said that was because a big part of our audience came over from Star Wars. A lot of our fans were once upon a time the diehard Star Wars expanded universe
I remember when you
readers.
guys were first talking about this, and then you were posting some stuff on Facebook and stuff, and you were calling it Star Wars, not Star Wars.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, it's Star Wars, but it's not Star Wars. Like that was kind of our thing is, we felt like we can capture the vibe, we can capture the things that made those movies and those stories fun without it actually being the thing, without having like, Duke Skywalker or something like that, and just winking at the camera. Um, so that was kind of the marketing approach, having armored space marines, which anybody who's been around science fiction for more than 20 years is aware that the stormtroopers were not the first concept of an armored space marine, right? Like that's been around for some time. But even just taking them and saying, well, let's make them more like GWAT soldiers and have them actually good at what they do and good at shooting and able to hit their targets, able to move tactically, all that kind of stuff, able to go through an open door without bumping their heads. Um, all the little things that are hard to do with Star Wars. So that was kind of our thing. And that was coming on the heels of, I think Disney had just purchased Star Wars, right around that time. And Rogue One came out and people were feeling like, well, this isn't too bad. This could be okay. And, and that optimism died a fiery death. It's like,
Yeah.
and yeah. And I think a lot of people who were readers and not just fans of the movie kind of had a bad feeling early on when they're like, hey, all that great stuff that kept Star Wars alive in the 90s, it's all gone. Like it didn't happen. Um, so at any rate, like there were a lot of people who invested a lot of themselves into that lore and into that universe. And so we just said, hey, like we own this. We're not going to do this. And so we're not going to let this turn into a movie where they change the characters or file off the personalities or flip the genders or anything like that. Um, and that's literally cost us opportunities to turn it into a movie because um, like that's exactly like a studio doesn't want like writers are just the scum of Hollywood. Like nobody cares about them. They're the lowest of the low, and that's like screenwriters, people who are actually there. You take one of us, you take like just someone that's writing a novel, and you're even lower on the totem pole. So no studio is interested in you saying it's got to be done my way. Um, and so as long as that's the case, it's probably not going to happen unless we finance it ourselves. And I think that would probably have to be a project that we take on when it's the only project we're going to take on, kind of a end of the road, or find, that rare independent studio that comes up and has the ability to work outside the Hollywood system. So that's one dead end. The other dead end is until Hollywood finally taps out and says, okay, I guess we do have to entertain more than just, our targeted small, narrow demographic. A story like Galaxy's Edge, with so much of its emphasis on liberty and despotism and overthrowing tyrants, it just isn't going to play well. And so we had talks with a major studio, and they flat out told us, hey, we're not going to make a movie meant to appeal to right-wing Christian drafts. And we're like, well, that's us, I guess. So that's, we understand, but that's where it goes. And when you've got studios that have the power where a mid-level executive can just kind of put it out there like that, you've got to sell a lot more books and really become a movement before that's going to happen. Otherwise, just take the check, and when they change all the characters and kind of wear it as a skin suit, you just shrug, and at least you have a little bit of money.
Yeah, see, I'm the opposite way. I would just I want somebody to make a terrible movie out of my books. Just give me the check. I don't care.
Yeah, right.
Because it's not mine anymore after that. It's like, I feel like there's probably never going to be a movie of any of my books, but why not take a chance on it? And maybe most likely it'll be terrible, but then most movies are, and at least this one has a chance of not being terrible. So
someone capable might do it, right?
Right, it could happen. I want to well, why don't you give me, before I turn this over to questions from the crowd, why don't you give me a quick overview of, so you've got Galaxy's Edge, I'm looking at this ad, and Land and Sea, Blood and Thunder, Forgotten Ruin, The Lost World, and Warlord. Can you tell me what all these are?
Yeah, so all those are just different series that Wargate's been publishing. So those would be the series that, are either on track to publish this year or have published this year. So but you can get a sense, we kind of break Wargate into a few different sub-imprints. We have Wargate Books, which focuses on military fantasy. And so that's going to be like Forgotten Ruin, where we've got U.S. Army Rangers fighting against orcs and hill giants and trolls and things like that, and trying to figure out the math of what, Carl Gustav can do to a hill giant, and what does that actually look like. And if you had a group of Rangers and they wanted to kill a dragon, what would you actually tactically do? And this is why this is such an awesome job, because you call your ranger friends and you say, okay, here's the mission, here's what the dragon can do, here's its lair, what do you do? And we're thinking about this grand idea of this big sweeping kind of battle of the five armies type situation. They're like, oh no, that's not what we do at all. And how quick they go into, we're gonna go in there. We're gonna slide down on the quick ropes. Like we're gonna use thermite. Like they're just kind of going onto it. So that's kind of that series. Warlord is also in that same genre. It's very much an homage to John Carter, but it's taking a Green Beret and kind of putting him on a planet, and he's using his time as a Green Beret to kind of figure out, okay, how do I help the princess? How do I keep everything where it's going? That was written by a former Green Beret named Doc Spears. Blood and Thunder is one that's written with a guy named Brian Williamson that I'm working on with him. That's just taking like a 1989 cavalry unit that was in Panama, and they end up in kind of an Aztec monster-infested world, and they're possibly dead, possibly not, and they're trying to figure out how to get out. So that's basically, that's the flavor, a variation of that flavor over and over again. And The Lost is recon Marines that get transported into kind of a Norse Celtic world of ice and monsters. And Peter Nealon, who's just a fantastic writer and a really great guy, he did that one. And so that's just it. It's, our whole thing was, when people are done with Forgotten Ruin, we know that they're going to want more Forgotten Ruin, but we can't write a Forgotten Ruin book every week, but we can say, well, here's a book that might scratch the itch. And so that's worked out pretty well. Land and Sea is Blaine Pardoe's Tom Clancy meets mechs. So, Tom Clancy now with more stomping action and and he's an amazing writer, and very gifted, wonderful at building a universe, wonderful at just doing it. To me, it feels like a classic way because so much modern indie writing, it just jumps you right in, and I'm obviously guilty of that myself, but just jumps you right in and doesn't let up on the gas. But Blaine knows how to build a story. Blaine knows how to set up a world, and he does it as good as anybody. Um, and there's probably more in that ad as well. But yeah, that's the essential concept. It's just sort of taking Galaxy's Edge, taking all the different books that we've gotten that we know our audience likes, and saying, what else do you have? We signed Mark Sibley, who wrote a World War III fiction novel called Mongol Moon, and we're going to be republishing that, as well as its long awaited sequel. And that novel is, it's almost better if you don't read it, because the way he set up World War III happening, and America being invaded and being hit. You look at what happens in the news now, and he wrote this in like 2019. But you look at the news now, and you look at the southern border, and you go, oh man, this feels like it's turning towards nonfiction as opposed to fiction. And Mark's a guy that works in the intelligence community in a way that it might not be as big of a stretch as we wish it was.
And Ryan, you mentioned Ryan Williamson. That's the same Ryan Williamson that was at our the first BasedCon, who was the moderator of the panel with you guys.
Yeah.
So
Ryan lives up here by me, and he's a very good writer. And
yeah, he was very helpful the first year. Made a target run so that we could have speakers, because I forgot to get speakers. So
nice. Yeah. No, and he's a great writer, and we felt like we could put out a book that the audience would like, and that's similar to how I said with Nick Cole. It was, hey, can you show me how to do this? I'm blessed now to be in the position where, as Ryan's coming up, and he's had his books, but it's sort of, all right, let's work together on this project, and let's see how it is, and see if it's helpful, see if I can impart anything of value. And I feel like what we've put together is a really nice book that should be finished up here at the end of the year. But again, it all depends on when the audiobook narrators can get around to it.
And I should say, by the way, that it's really impressive the way that you guys, like, you have the logos and the I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but the look of all these things is you have the branding, the packaging for these series. So it's like it's all, the series is all it feels like it's well thought out. Like, you're communicating that to the reader, like, we're serious from the beginning, because you have a bunch of books that are branded the same, have the same look and feel, great cover art. I don't know. I guess I don't really have a question. I just think it's really impressive the way that you guys do this. Come out with these lines that are instantly recognizable, and you can tell that they tie together.
Thank you.
It's just cool. And related to your last, you had mentioned Ryan getting involved with you, and other people, and Blaine, of course, who had already very well established. If someone wanted to publish with you, had a book that kind of fits what you guys are doing, how would they contact you? Or should they?
Yeah, we've actually, we're planning on putting something on the website for that. And we have had people reach out to us. And a lot of times what we get is, I wrote a novel, X years ago, and I think it could be a good fit, which sometimes is true, sometimes is false. But what we're trying to do is just to make sure that we've got the bandwidth in place, because we definitely aren't like Bain, where we can have a certain number of people that are just dedicated to reading the slush pile. Most of the time what happens is we get a pitch or we get a sample, and it gets emailed to me or to Nick or to one of our editors, and we'll just kind of get around the table and say, okay, here's the pitch. Everyone reads that, and we say, yeah, I feel like that could work. I feel like that's a good idea. And then we read the sample, and depending on that, if we feel like the quality's there, then we might, bring them in. But I think, we're at that point where we're just kind of taking it on as people come along and trying to find good fits, trying to find people who are teachable, because we definitely have a way that we like to publish that we feel like optimizes your book for success. Our feeling is that with each project we do, we have an expectation of success, but that requires a fair amount of work upfront and a fair amount of discipline. And it also requires, because of the different avenues of success that we found, especially with audio, sometimes that means writing different than your typical voice would. And so there has to be a willingness to listen to our editors when they say, this looks great on the page, it sounds awful in an audiobook, and you have to be thinking about that kind of a thing. So I'd say, if you have something, you can just reach out to me, and I will pass it on to the next person, and we'll kind of go from there. But we're a slow process, and until we feel like we've got a smooth system that can go into place, we don't want to say, hey, just send it in,
Right.
and we'll get it back to you, because it would just sit. And we don't want people to, maybe people are used to waiting 6 to 9 months to hear back, but we don't like to do that to people. So we want to make sure we've got something in place where we can take unsolicited stuff and go with it. But at the same time, if someone reaches out to us and gives us a pitch, we definitely read every piece of email we get.
Okay. So I want to, what's that? Address? Yes. Should they email you then, or?
Yeah, email is fine. Easy enough. It's jason@wargatebooks.com. And that one's pretty straightforward. But yeah, ideally sell it in the email, and it'll go to like a 4-person team, and then we probably have a few follow-up questions. But I can tell you, like, a lot of the times what we ask the authors is, it's all right, if you were to work on this, how fast, how long do you think it would take you to write this book? How long do you think it would take you to write the second book? And the reason for that is just, it's very difficult to break out any new series now if it's just one book and then next year the next book comes. And so what we find is there's a lot of people who have great ideas, but what they don't have is the time or the confidence to go and say, I'm going to write 3 or 4 books in a series, and this is going to be my plan, moving forward. But we just keep seeing that's what it takes now.
Yeah.
In this blooded market space that's been burned by some pretty big writers with some pretty big series that don't need to be named, but are still unfinished. The audience has reacted to that. And so I think there's a few writers that have proven themselves to their audience that they're not going to leave them hanging, but there's a larger audience that has no idea and just isn't interested until they see some serious forward progress.
Yep. More questions? Nothing? No. Blaine's got a question.
I hear you're working on with Blaine Pardo on a mech book for Galaxy's Edge. I was wondering where we're at on that.
Yeah, if anyone happens to see Blaine, I don't know where he is, but if anyone happens to see, he can actually probably tell you from this book how it's absolutely true that you can write a book and have it going, but once it starts into the fine-tuning editing process, it feels like time stands still. And so he's written a nice book that really expands Galaxy's Edge use of mechs, but now that has to go through Galaxy's Edge's mechanical editing system. There's a lot of canon and a lot of readers who will call us out if we get anything wrong. We have readers that I think have surpassed the creator's ability to recall what we said here or there. So things take time now, a lot more time than they used to when it was all fresh and we had a blank canvas. And every month we could release a new Galaxy's Edge book and find inspiration and then just go off in another direction. Now we have to be consistent, which is a curse, which is why we start new series.
Yeah. Did you and Nick have any idea what you were starting when you when you first got into this and had this sort of Star Wars, not Star Wars idea? Did you have any idea how big it was that it was gonna be so big?
No. I mean, I didn't. I knew that you could do okay writing, but I never thought it would reach a point where, like, it's an odd feeling when you have your day job and you have how you're making money and how you're providing health insurance and all those things, and you're kind of looking at your sales and you're looking at your paycheck and you say, I'm leaving money on the table by going to work every day. And that's essentially, that was the turning point for me, was saying, okay, I have to just go after this, wholeheartedly, because the sky's the limit here. But no, we plan for success, but like, I don't know that you'd be like, that's planning for serious success. But I guess a lot of us picture ourselves in the bottom of the ninth inning in the World Series, or something along those lines. But it was like that for us. We thought it was a good idea. The feedback we received from our beta testers, our beta readers, was very strong. The vets that we talked to and interviewed, just to get the right feel, really liked what they were reading. So we had positive feedback all the way through. But we had no way of knowing that it would sell so many copies and have such a strong word of mouth fandom that it would just blow up everywhere the way it did. That was great. We had no idea that R.C. Bray would transition from up and coming narrator to rock star among narrators at the exact same time. And so that was big. It's really something that we just look back on, and we just see, God blessing us throughout that process, protecting us from a lot of, early bad deal opportunities, a lot of, publishers that came in and said, hey, we can next level you if you accept these terrible, terrible deals. But you'll have this, you'll have that. And being able to say, no, we're going to keep doing this our way. And, and we're still standing, and a lot of those publishers are gone now. So it was a blessing. It was providence throughout it, but yeah, had no idea. Like, I would have written it faster if I'd have known that was going to happen. I'd have had like 50 or 60 books lined up and be like, oh, this is going to happen. Let's make it happen.
Well, it's very cool to see it happen. And because you guys, I mean, I know I knew Nick before all this, and I had seen your name a bit, and then you just kind of blew up, and all of a sudden the stuff was everywhere, and I was like, your books would come out, and it'd be like the next day there's like 500 reviews, and you're number one in your category and all this stuff, and I was just like, this is insane, the level of, that the way they've taken off. So it's really cool. Any more questions? I think that's it. We're pretty much running on time here, so I'm going to take advantage of this. Let you make any final remarks if you want to pitch anything or sell anything to the BasedCon crowd.
No, I don't have anything I need to sell. That's okay, but I will. What I'll do is
this big ad in the back of the program.
I'll go back into the lore, because you jogged my memory when you're talking about how you knew about Nick, and so this is I don't know if this is a fun story, but it's a story that's in the back of my mind. There was a time, Rob, when you were doing a D&D podcast, I recall.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're probably like, oh yeah, those guys. Right.
Yeah.
So
I don't
we
talk
had
to them
started
anymore.
one. Yeah, we had started one about the same time, and ours was called Sci-Fi Writers Playing Old School D&D. Yours was called what was yours called?
Authors and Dragons.
Authors and Dragons. Right. Yeah. So we had these two, and we're playing, and we're like, oh, okay, whatever. That's fun. And we had this guy in the group that turns out was like just a little bit of a, like, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist, but I think I can say psychotic. And he like went up on your Facebook page and just started yelling and screaming at you about like, oh, you're stealing my idea and blah, 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 just all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And this is totally unbeknownst to the rest of the group that's playing. We were kind of a live and let live. And so this guy is just raging against you for having the same idea as us at the same time. And how dare you? And then he comes back into the group chat and he's like, yeah, I really let that guy have it. And Nick and I were like subtweeting on the backside. We're like, oh man, I like Rob more than this guy. Like, what do I say? So we were like, well, let's kick him out of the group.
The funny thing is that I was just just kind of invited to that group, or it was just like people were talking about it. I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And like, it wasn't my idea at all. And this guy had it in his head that he was that like, yeah, I had taken this idea of his,
Mhm.
and it wasn't even original then. So, and I don't know,
Mhm.
it
Right.
wasn't, I don't know why he came at me in particular, because I was just kind of tangentially involved in this thing.
Because I think at that time you were willing to be a openly conservative libertarian, and he was, I would say, a closeted, very closeted liberal that became less closeted as time went on, and just would go crazy. So he ended up doing another rant like that against Nick within the next 6 months. But at the time, like that's when Nick and I were like, well, we like Rob more than this guy, so what should we do? And
Oh, that's
just
good.
kicked him out of the group. Like, yeah, don't need it. Don't need this kind of drama. Thanks.
Yeah, I
So,
remember
but
when.
that's about the time that I first started hearing about you.
I,
When I would see these rage hate posts
I'm
for you
pretty
having
sure
the
that
audacity to play D&D.
I think Nick, before I mean, I kind of knew him a little bit, and he actually invited me to be in that group, and had already said I would be in this other one, so I was like, well, I'm kind of already doing this, so it's kind of funny that all comes
Yeah,
together.
it is.
Okay, well, yeah, again, it's been great to see you guys' success, and I hope that I mean, on one hand, I kind of hope that like the publishing industry and Hollywood and everybody catches on eventually. That there are a lot of people that are not being served with the current crop of entertainment. On the other hand, I kind of hope that you guys just take over and like they never figure it out, and you just keep eating their lunch. So it'd be good to see. So anyway, I'm gonna let you
Yeah,
go. It's been great having you as always, and you guys have been big supporters of BasedCon from the beginning, and I really appreciate that.
yeah. No, it's important what you're doing. Thank you, Rob.